I'm Father Cajetan Cuddy, the General Editor of the Encyclopedia of Catholic Theology, here with my colleague, the Managing Editor of the Encyclopedia of Catholic Theology, Dr. Matthew Meinard. And in this video, a series that examines, reads, studies, discusses in brief the lexicon entries found on ect.org, we're going to talk about one of the most important lexicon entries that we can find on ect.org, and that's the entry on being. And as you'll see on your screen as I read it, this is what we have: being, and then we have in parentheses in Latin ens. 1. That which is, in Latin, id quod est. The subject whose proper act is existence. Number 2. A synonym for existence, although when understood in this existential sense, it denotes an act rather than the subject of an act. Now, Dr. Meinard has a PhD in philosophy from the Catholic University of America, and he's a skilled philosopher, not just a skilled theologian. And so we're going to turn to him to lead us off in this discussion about being. But the one thing I tell all of my students is that if you don't know what natural being is, or have some conception of being, some concept of being, you're not going to be able to understand what divine being is. If we don't know what natural reality is, which we get through sensation, through understanding the phenomena around us, we will have a difficult time understanding what divine revelation reveals to us, communicates to us from God. And so being is one of the most important words in Catholic theology, I would propose, even though it, technically speaking, is not idiosyncratic to Catholic theology. But Dr. Meinard, please, you have many things to help us with here. Please give us your thoughts. As when we were working on this lexicon entry, what were some of the things that are noteworthy to you?
Oh,
you,
well, I have
you only
to
have 4 hours.
say it.
You only have 4 hours.
Yeah. Well, what I mean, as Father Cuddy can say, when we did these, Father Cuddy likes a very clear and crystalline style for entries so that you get the essence of what's at stake. I sort of add qualification, addition, don't misunderstand it this way sorts of things. I clearly left this. I mean, I thought about them as we edited it. We left this be where I just thought I'm going to leave it as is because people can read the metaphysics definition, etc. Because boy, would I like to unpack this massively. And that's okay. That's okay, because this lexicon is going to be quite different than whenever we have a metaphysics entry, right, that deals with metaphysics as a science of being as being. How can you not run into that which is? So the definition is focusing above all really upon the existing subject is sort of the focus here. But we really could drench being across every single thing that we can say is. Whenever I say you have a given state of soul, right? You are well, let's not be supernatural, you're a priest, but you are virtuous. You are a certain height. You are the son of someone. Technically, that's a tree out there, but this is a coaster made of wood. One is an artifact and one is a living thing. We do speak of the fact that, living things are in a very different way than we are as spiritual embodied beings. Angels are in a way that's completely separate from materiality. God is as pure act. Boy, is being that which is does a lot of lifting across all of our experience. There is nothing that we can think that is not, I can get all my negatives correct, there's nothing we can think that is not in some way being. Being is the first thing, sorry for an Avicennian moment, being is the first thing, but Thomas Aquinas says it too, that falls into the intellect. Caught it. He says it. I can't remember if it's in the Arab, the Persian Arab author. Actually, I'm aware that the Persians are not Arab, but he's writing in Arabic. Author Avicenna, caught it, that it falls into the intellect. Everything that we can conceptualize, judge, or reason about in some way is being. And what's weird is even whenever we try to think about non-being, we have to be very careful about how we think of non-being like it's being. Right? You say nothingness is what is presupposed for creation. or nothing is presupposed for creation. It's very mysterious how the mind has to sort of grapple even with non-being to make it, it seems almost like being. Creates all sorts of paradoxes in philosophy. And so being sort of horizontally and vertically cuts through the whole of reality. Someday, I can't wait for us to do our entry on transcendentals. Being is such a rich notion, actually, that our intellect finds that it has to sort of just abound in other notions, which are actually just other refractions, other lights on being, which are known as transcendentals. Being is manifestive to intelligence. So all that is true, for instance, or that which is has a kind of non-division. So being and unity have a co-equal relationship. So being is just incredibly rich. It drenches reality because all that is, is. So
Amen.
That's my
Amen.
initial thought. I mean, we could run through the proper methods of metaphysics, etc.
And we will.
I mean, it's just
one day.
Yeah, and we will.
Yeah,
and we will.
Absolutely, we will. We will.
And if you ever want to just tune your mind to the mystery that's at hand with being and its connection, especially to its actuality through existence. Not you, I'm sure you this has been for you, but dear listener, watcher, practice. I like to think of it as silent listening to being, the fact that you exist. Practice listening intellectually, or as a knower, to the fact that you exist and that you aren't not. That can overwhelm the mind if you realize the fact that you're a contingent existent, that yet you are. It's like all of a sudden you feel pressing upon you the reality of being, and then this could be played out throughout all of our experience in all sorts of ways. A memory is an exercise sometimes in realizing that things no longer what they are, and there's a melancholy at that. We can sense all these different shades of what it is to be or to have been, and it just plays such an important role philosophically, right? Through metaphysics, through phenomenology, through the constituting of moral entity, etc. Sorry, but you couldn't expect me to not do this.
It's marvelous. That's what I was hoping you would do. I was hoping.
Going to be enchanted.
It's a marvelous thing. And it is theological being, or leads to theology, both natural and supernatural, because God is the principle, the cause of all things, insofar as they are and are good. And so, although philosophy and theology are distinct sciences, both are radically, irrevocably, permanently configured around what is. And I know that one of the deep convictions you and I have is that the renewal of Catholic theology is executed through resolving everything back into being and reality. When these are not just ideas about reality. We understand things through concepts, through ideas, through ens rationis, yes, but ordered to what is the case. And even ens rationis, and ens rationis is a being in a certain sense. And so don't think, my point here, I just want to say to our dear listeners, is Dr. Meinert, although he might have gotten off on a little bit of philosophical nerddom, I love it, but don't discount it. This is absolutely at the heart of Catholic theology, because if we're not talking about being in reality, both what it is and what it does and how it does what it does, then we're literally in nothing. And you can't study nothing, as Dr. Meinert says, in and of itself. All right, we could probably go on for a lot longer.
But let's spare the people. They've got dinner. They've got something.
Question?
Children. No. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? I was just going to say that. Let's imagine one of your dear daughters came up to you and said, "Dad, what do you do in that book-laden office of yours all day?" And you said, "Well, I'm writing about being." And she asked you, "Dad, what is being?" In a brief paragraph to like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old girl, what would you say?
Oh, that's a really, boy, you've just put me on the spot, actually.
You can do it.
I actually remember years ago doing something as a catechist where it was kind of dumb, whatever I said. I was like, the kids sort of looked at me with the doe eyes thinking, what it's being. I would probably have to, okay, this is terrible. There are many paths This is my mind is thinking freely. There are many paths to the vision, so to speak, of being. And my kids have at least experienced and in a sense have processed actually death a bit. Because of passing of my own stepfather, and then soon thereafter, a very, very dear priest to our family. And I feel like there's someone else that there was like 3 in sequence. I think especially my oldest could take it, that I would talk about, I feel like my dear teacher, Monsignor Sokolowski, I would use the presence and absence of a person to point out the immense difference between the at least embodied existence of someone and then their absence. And then I would also maybe then play off that, because they're being raised in a Catholic household, to talk about what they know about the saints. I'd probably actually use the faith to then buttress this, right? That we are not unconcerned with them precisely because they are. That's actually probably the way I would go. This is, the paths to being are pretty manifold. And I do think that the experience of the non-being that we see sort of at work in us can do it. And so my poor kids, having at least half Slavic father, has a certain grim approach to how you'd get them to understand, see what being is, because I would want them to be confronted with it. I guess I'm a big believer in that shock of something is that need not be, or something is not that was. So yeah, there you have it.
And
this is what happens.
That's
ECT gets you, ECT plus gets you a bit of Minard and Cuddy on their toes.
And it's both true and very effective, because of course what concerns on a primordial level a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, and what concerns a 75-year-old are ultimately the same things. And so certainly our adult listeners can understand. We all know the difference between being and non-being when it comes to someone who was important to us and who has died, and we understand that difference. No, so that's why I asked that, one, maybe to see Dr. Minard squirm just a little, but this is an example of something which extends even beyond infancy. These are the most, children contemplate the questions that we never outgrow. So you were going to say something, Doctor.
Yeah. Oh, well, you could play the game of get them to understand why they keep asking why questions as well, because you can basically push them back into the principle of non-contradiction. I think I remember once seeing someone shared with me a comedian who did this. Comedians are always a little bit questionable because they can be, I'm not sure who it was, and that's probably for the best, but I don't want to necessarily endorse whoever it was. But it was kind of amusing because behind their questioning is the question of being as well. Why? Ultimately, it's just because some things are and some things are not. The principle of non-contradictions there.
Amen.
I'm just a little bit curious. You're probably thinking, I want to be done with this, but Minard's going to be a dog biting on the bone of being. I'm curious for you, because, I sort of respect the solidity of both your mind and your practical, your pastoral sense. How would you do this if you were doing catechesis? Yeah, you see, it's hard.
I would. No, it is a hard question. No, it is. I would do the phenomenological approach, which is why I would say I would just point around and begin naming things which are, and then I would talk about the fact that because we know that certain things that is different from not knowing things that are not. I would probably I would allied very quickly to the fact that they both are the audience, the members, the parishioners, the children, if it was CCD, and that they act. And I would go from there. To be honest, when I teach this to my students, I start. Now we're going to get a little technical here, but we won't go on this long. But for Dr. Minard, I start with second act and operations. Usually, I say every little kid knows the difference between eating a real ice cream cone, and a fake toy ice cream cone, and what that distinction is. That's the beginning of that's approaching.
You're getting them to see the existence of the cherry between their teeth. It's a lot different than just the idea of a cherry. I mean, it's once again, it's you're trying to grab at something. But yeah, I think that actually doing that's very good. Actually, to use operation that way. because people know themselves as actors. And then you can do this with regard to others too, like how you can relate it, perhaps if it's a child, to how they relate to the activities of their parents, right? And here I thought you were going to rehearse sort of one of those ways of doing the principle of non-contradiction from Book Gamma, the Metaphysics. That's where I thought you were going, actually. But I'm glad to see the existential, operational side can live there. All right, we're being nerds. We're being nerds in front of the people. So it's bad.
Fun. We So good. All right. So this has been a discussion, a very fun discussion between Dr. Myers and myself on the Lexicon entry on being, and we will be back in a future episode to discuss other fun graphical lexicon entries in a future episode.